Hello. In this video, we'll look at some more features that allow us to use blend modes in a more versatile way and allow us to add other effects to the image while also having blend modes. For example, in our previous video, I talked about how we can add a white background by putting the white on top and creating a blend mode of multiply, which then adds white only on the outside of the deer. However, this gets complicated if we want to start adding another image to the background or colors, and blend modes won't really allow us to just place red around the deer, and it gets complicated. So let's look at a couple features that help us as we move forward with a vision like that, and also some effects that we can add to the image, like a color fill and a gradient. So firstly, what I'll show you how to do is to combine these images which we've created, or these layers which we've created. So we have these 4 layers, and I want to combine them into one layer so that it's just a static layer and it doesn't have a blend mode on it, and then I can use it like any other layer. And the way we do that, firstly, we'll hide the white layer because we don't want that right now. I want to make this image here one layer. So if you click on the top layer in your set of layers, and you go to the menu, and you can look here at these 3 options here. So we have merge down, merge visible, and flatten image. So what flattening and merging do is they take multiple layers and make them all one layer. They flatten the image, they take all 4 of these and squish them down into one layer. Now if we had this one visible, it would include that too when we do merge visible. So merging visible takes all the layers that are visible and merges them together. Merge down will just merge this one down with all the layers below it. And flatten will take all the layers that you have and flatten them into one layer. So right now we can do merge visible. I'll do merge down just to show you what that does. So merge down actually only merges one down, so that actually won't work right now. So I'm on the deer mask. If you do merge down, it only merges down one layer. And because we have blend modes on all of these and they're interacting with each other, if we did that, if we merge this to this and then this to this and this to this, it'll really change how the image looks. So what we want to do is merge visible. I hid the white layer. I'll click merge visible. And now all of these layers are one layer. And if I go to my move tool, I can't move it because it's locked. So let's unlock that. We'll click here. And notice here it's selected on locked, and you know that it's locked because it has that lock on the layer. So I'll click unlock, and now I can move it around, and I can move this, I can rotate it, just like any other layer, and all those layers are now one layer. And now I can put my white layer behind it and make it visible. I can also start adding color behind it. And just like any other layers, it will block out where the deer will block out where I'm drawing because I'm in the layer below. All right, I'm going to undo that scribbling. And I'll show you a couple fun tools. One is called the fill tool or the paint bucket tool, and one is called the gradient tool. So let's start with our blank white layer. The fill tool is this tool right here, and if we hover over it, you can see the explanation of what it does, and it fills whole areas with a single color. So if I click here, takes it a few seconds, but it will fill in with the foreground color. If I switch them, it will now fill in with the new foreground color. So I'm going to grab a picture here, and I think I'll just go back and get that original deer head that we used. Copy that and paste it in here. And the fill tool, as you can see, if you look at the tool options bar, it has similar settings to the wand tool, which we learned a few videos ago. And these settings do the same thing, and the fill tool works in the same way. So again, there's the contiguous setting, and right now contiguous is turned on. And if I click on the green and select here and fill, takes it a second. Notice that the white areas that are closed off to this white area did not get filled. So I could go in and individually fill all these little white areas. Or I could go, let's go back, and if I turn off contiguous, because if I click on the white here, it will fill in all the white areas that are contiguous, so that are touching and connected. But not these areas. But if I turn contiguous off, it'll fill in all the white areas, or all the areas that are similar in tonal value to the point that I click. So in this case, it's white, and if I click there, you can see that it filled in all the areas, and it left the gray alone. Now, just as with the wand tool, there's a feathered edge often on your images, and you can see that the green only goes to a certain point. And you can fix that. Let's undo the fill again. And you can fix that by adjusting your tolerance. And I believe when we did the wand tool, 129 was a really good setting that filled in that edge really nicely, but did not spill into the deer. And we'll try that. And you can see now that it filled up to the edge pretty nicely. And we filled the edge of the deer head green. You could also flip it, so we could go to red and we could fill in inside the deer head. So if I click here, and again, I'm going to turn contiguous off so it just gets all the parts of the deer head, and I've got red. So that actually spilled out into the green. So we'll undo that and set it a little lower. Try it around 100 there. There we go. So I clicked on the deer head part of the image, and it filled it in all red. It filled in all the gray parts red. So I've now changed the colors of the image, and that's using the fill tool. And again, it works just like the wand tool, where it fills in areas that are touching each other, or it fills in areas that are similar in tone to the point that you click. And this number tells PIXLR how much of a range of tones to look for when it's filling in the image. And important to note is that this goes up to 255. So there's 255 tones from white to black in PIXLR, and you can tell it how much of a range of tones to fill from the point you click on. Now, if you set it to 255 in any image, it'll fill the entire screen because there's only 255 tones. So you're telling it, fill in every tone. You know, you're selecting the entire tonal range that's available. So it would just fill up the whole screen, and we can see that. If I click here, it fills everything. Okay, let's just pop that down. Not that we need it right now. Oops. So that's your fill tool, and the next tool we'll look at is the gradient tool, which is right next to the fill tool. And the fill tool is a little paint bucket that's being tipped over to fill in, so you can think of it as you're actually spilling the bucket into areas of the image. And now we'll look at the gradient tool, which adds, and if we hover here, you can see that it adds a gradient, which is a shift in colors. So it creates blends of colors. And let's look at what that does. So when you're in your gradient tool and you look up at your tool options bar, you've got a couple different options to choose from. This is your blend mode, so just like your blend mode in your layers that we've been over. Opacity is how see-through it is, and then here is your actual gradient, and by default it'll be your foreground color to your background color. So these two colors that I've selected, if I change these, it will adjust when I go off the tool and back to it. You can see now that it's from my foreground color to my background color. And then the linear and radial options are the way that the shift happens with the gradient tool, and we'll look at that in a moment. So I'm going to create a new layer, an empty layer, and I'll take my gradient tool, and what happens is you click and then you drag, so this creates a line and it also creates an angle. So let's do straight up, and we'll do a nice long line there. And you can see that it creates a gradient, which is a shift from one color to another. And the way it creates the gradient is from the point, so the shift happens, the shift of the gradient, so from this color to this color, happens in the length that I made the line. So if you'll recall, I clicked right here, and I drew the line to about here, and you can see that that's the area where the shift is happening. If I make a really small line, the shift will happen in that small range. If I make a line from the bottom to the top, the shift happens all the way in that entire range. I could even start off the image and go off the image, and you'll see that it never really reaches the full intensity of the color, because it's actually the full background color is all the way out here and the full foreground color is all the way here. So you're in the entirety of the shift there. And the angle of the line affects the angle of the shift. So in this case, the gradient goes this way, and you can make really short gradients or really long gradients, and they can go in any direction you like. So this is linear, which it basically goes from one color to another in a straight line, and then radial is different in that it goes in a circular shift. So it'll start at the point that you click, and it'll shift in the length of the line that you create, but the angle doesn't matter because it's a circle, so it's going to shift. Doesn't matter which angle you're at, it's going to be a circle coming out from the point that you click. But the length of the line does matter. You can see that a short line will create a very short gradient there, and a long line will create a very long gradient. And again, you can click off the image so that it's more like this and not the full circle, but it's circular. Okay, so I'm going to hide this layer and come down to here, and we'll see that there's a difference with this tool and the paint bucket tool in that, firstly, if we look at our tool options bar, we don't see that tolerance setting, and that's because the gradient doesn't fill in areas. It fills in the entire layer. So I've hidden this layer. Actually, we'll just go ahead and delete that layer so as not to confuse. And we have this layer where we filled in the deer head red-ish and the background color there. And if I make a gradient now in this background area, it's going to fill in the entire layer. So I'll undo that, Command C. And if you want there to be a background, that's a gradient. You have to work with your layers with that. So we have this original image here that we flattened, and I can go to this layer and show that, and I can create a gradient. So I'm in this bottom layer here, and I can create a gradient like that. There we go. And add effects to to the image. Now, if you want to change the colors in your gradient, you don't always have to change them here. What you can do is click on your gradient up here, and you can set the colors that you want in the gradient. So if you click on this little bucket here and click on the color, you can select anything you want. You can also add colors, so you can have as many colors as you can fit in there. And we can select that color and choose that. And wherever you drag it is how subtle the shift will be between the colors. So you can have 3 there, or you can add more. And you can see that you can add lots of different colors into your gradient. And it can look pretty wild. There are also preset gradients. If there's something you want to use that looks really nice, that's a preset, you can just go ahead and click on one of the presets. So I'm going to hide the deer layer here for a moment and show you what the blend modes do when we use our gradient tool. And they can add really cool effects to the gradient tool. And let's start with linear. So I'll just click on linear there, and we'll set our blend mode to difference. Let's try that. And we'll just keep it on this one gradient. And what that does, so what just happened there is I had the original gradient, which was this one, and I made one on top, and as it made it, it used the blend mode difference to apply the 2 gradients instead of just covering up. So if we have it on normal or none, it just covers up the previous gradient. But if we set it to a blend mode, it will combine the 2 gradients with using the rules of that blend mode. And you can create lots of different pretty fascinating backgrounds using blend modes and gradients. And of course, I'm just using this one gradient here, this red to dark there. And you can see it creates really interesting effects. And of course, if you go in and change the colors, it's really going to start creating some pretty trippy images. So gradients can do really fun things. They can add really colorful, exciting effects to your backgrounds or to parts of your image. And of course, you could then take the gradient and use a blend mode on the layer. So I've moved it on top, and I could add a layer blend mode. I could do a mask and add some really interesting things into the image there. So I'll move that back down. So that is gradients and fill tool and the different settings. And of course, opacity, I didn't go over, but that just affects the transparency of the gradient. And you can play around with that and see what that does. So I hope that gives you some tools to create some colorful and interesting images using shapes and layers and blend modes and gradients and fill and clipping out with the wand tool. This series of videos has gone through all that with the goal of giving you enough tools to create some colorful images that use basic shapes and line and really allow you to be creative with what's happening on your screen. Enjoy, and I'm really excited to see what you make.